Hello friends, today we are going to study part 2 of water pollution. In this lecture, we will study transport and reactions of water pollutants, then control of water pollution, and finally we will study preservative measures. Transport and chemical reactions of water pollutants. Most water pollutants are eventually carried by rivers into the oceans. In some areas of the world, the influence can be traced 100 miles from the mouth by studies using hydrology transport models. Models have been used in many locations worldwide to examine the fate of pollutants in aquatic systems. Indicated filter feeding species such as copypods have also been used to study the pollutant fates in the New York Bight. The highest toxin loads are not directly at the mouth of the Hudson River but 100 kilometers south, since several days are required for the incorporation into planktonic tissue. Further south are then areas of oxygen depletion caused by chemicals using up oxygen and by algae blooms caused by excess nutrients from algal cell death and decomposition. Fish and shellfish kills have been reported because toxins climb the food chain. After small fish consume copypods, then large fish eat smaller fish, etc. Each successive step up the food chain causes a stepwise concentration of pollutants such as heavy metals and persistent organic pollutants like DDT. This is known as biomagnification. The big gyres in the ocean trap floating plastic debris. The North Pacific Gyre, for example, has collected the so-called Great Pacific Garbage Patch that is now estimated at 100 times the size of Texas. Plastic debris can absorb toxic chemicals from ocean pollution, potentially poisoning anything that eats it. Many of these long-lasting species wind up in the stomachs of marine birds and animals. This results in obstruction of digestive pathways, which leads to reduced appetite or even starvation. Many chemicals undergo reactive decay or chemically change, especially over long periods of time in groundwater reservoirs. A noteworthy class of such chemicals is the chlorinated hydrocarbons such as trichloroethylene and tetrachloroethylene. Both of these chemicals, which are carcinogenic themselves, undergo partial decomposition reactions leading to new hazardous chemicals like dichloroethylene and vinyl chloride. Groundwater pollution is much more difficult to abate than surface pollution because groundwater can move great distances through unseen aquifers. Now, measurement of water pollution. Water pollution may be analyzed through several broad categories of methods, that is physical, chemical and biological. Most involve collection of samples followed by specialized analytical tests. Some methods may be conducted in situ without sampling, such as temperature. Now, sampling. Sampling of water for physical or chemical testing can be done by several methods depending on the accuracy needed and the characteristics of the contaminant. Many contamination events are sharply restricted in time, most commonly in association with rains. Physical testing. Common physical tests of water include temperature, solid concentrations and turbidity. Chemical testing. Water samples may be examined using the principles of analytical chemistry. Many published test methods are available for both organic as well as inorganic compounds. Frequently used methods include pH, biochemical oxygen demand, chemical oxygen demand, nutrients, metals, oil and grease, total petroleum hydrocarbons and pesticides. Now biological testing. Biological testing involves the use of plant, animal or microbial indicators to monitor the health of an aquatic ecosystem. Depending on the type of assessment, the organisms may be identified for biosurveys and returned to the groundwater, or they may be dissected for bioassays to determine toxicity. We will now study the control of water pollution. First of all, domestic sewage. Domestic sewage is typically 99.9% water with only 0.1% pollutants. Although found in low concentrations, these pollutants pose risk on a large scale. In urban areas, domestic sewage is typically treated by centralized sewage treatment plants. Well-designed and operated systems can remove 90% or more of these pollutants. Some plants have additional systems to remove nutrients and pathogens. Most municipal plants are not specifically designed to treat toxic pollutants found in industrial wastewater. Cities with sanitary sewer overflows or combined sewer overflows employ one or more engineering approaches to reduce discharges of untreated sewage, including utilizing a green infrastructure approach to improve stormwater management capacity throughout the system and reduce the hydraulic overloading of the treatment plant, repair and replacement of leaking and manufacturing equipment, increase the overall hydraulic capacity of the sewage collection system. A household or business not served by a municipal treatment plant may have an individual septic tank which treats the wastewater on the site and discharges into the soil. Industrial wastewater. Some industrial facilities generate ordinary domestic sewage that can be treated by municipal facilities. Industries that generate wastewater with high concentrations of conventional pollutants, for example oil and grease, toxic pollutants, for example heavy metals, volatile organic compounds or other non-conventional pollutants such as ammonia need specialized treatment systems. Some of these facilities can install a pre-treatment system to remove the toxic components and then send the partially treated wastewater to the municipal system. Industries generating large volumes of wastewater typically operate their own complete on-site treatment systems. Some industries have been successful at redesigning their manufacturing processes to reduce or eliminate pollutants through a process called pollution prevention. Heated water generated by power plants or manufacturing plants may be controlled with cooling ponds, man-made bodies of water designed for cooling by evaporation, convection and radiation, cooling towers which transfer waste heat to the atmosphere through evaporation or heat transfer cogeneration, a process where waste heat is recycled for domestic and industrial heating purposes. Now, agriculture wastewater. Non-point source wastewater treatment. Sediment washed off fields is the largest source of agricultural pollution. Farmers may utilize erosion controls to reduce runoff flows and retain soil on their fields. Common techniques include contour plowing, crop mulching, planting perennial crops, and installing riparian buffers. Nutrients are typically applied to farmland as commercial fertilizer, animal manure, or spraying of municipal or industrial wastewater. Nutrients may also enter the runoff from crop residues, irrigation water, wildlife and atmospheric deposition. Farmers can develop and implement nutrient management plans to reduce excess application of nutrients and reduce the potential for nutrient pollution. To minimize pesticide impacts, farmers may use integrated pest management techniques. To maintain control over pests, reduce reliance on chemical pesticides and protect water quality. Point source wastewater treatment. Farms with large livestock and poultry operations such as factory farms are called concentrated animal feeding operations or feedlots in the US and are being subject to increasing government regulation. Animal slurries are usually treated by containment in anaerobic lagoons before disposal by spray or trickle application to grassland. Constructed wetlands are sometimes used to facilitate treatment of animal wastes. Some animal slurries are treated by mixing with straw and composted at high temperature to produce a bacteriologically sterile and friable manure for soil improvement. Now, construction site storm water treatment. Sediment from construction sites is managed by installation of erosion controls such as mulching and hydroseeding and sediment controls such as sediment basins and silt fences. Discharge of toxic chemicals such as motor fuels and concrete washout is prevented by the use of spill prevention and control plans and specially designed containers and structures such as overflow controls and diversion berms. Now, urban runoff treatment. Effective control of urban runoff involves reducing the velocity and flow of storm water as well as reducing pollutant discharges. Local governments use a variety of stormwater management techniques to reduce the effects of urban runoff. These techniques, called best management practices in the US, may focus on water quantity control while others focus on improving water quality and some perform both functions. Pollution prevention practices include low impact development techniques, installation of green roofs and improved chemical handling. For example, management of motor fuels and oil fertilizers and pesticides. Runoff mitigation systems include infiltration basins, bioretention systems, constructed wetlands, retention basins and similar devices. Thermal pollution from runoff can be controlled by stormwater management facilities that absorb the runoff or direct it into groundwater such as bioretention systems and infiltration basins. What can we do to minimize water pollution? Dealing with water pollution is something that everyone, including governments and local councils, needs to get involved with. Here are a few things you can do to help. Learning about the issue like you are doing is the greatest and most important step to take. Here are a few more. Fertilize garden and yard plants with manure or compost instead of commercial inorganic fertilizer. Minimize use of pesticides. Do not apply fertilizer or pesticides near a body of water. Grow or buy organic foods. Do not drink bottled water unless tests show that your tap water is contaminated. Merely refill and reuse plastic bottles with tap water. Compost your food wastes. Do not use water fresheners in toilets and do not flush unwanted medicines down the toilet. Do not pour pesticides, paints, solvents, oil, antifreeze or other products containing harmful chemicals down the drain or onto the ground. What can governments, local councils and laws do to minimize water pollution? Many governments have very strict laws that help minimize water pollution. These laws are usually directed to industries, hospitals and market areas on how to dispose, treat and manage sewage. There are also lots of organizations and groups that help educate people on the dangers of water pollution. It's always great to join these groups because they regularly encourage other members of their communities to have a better attitude towards water. Several forms of legislation have been passed in recent decades to try to control water pollution. The Clean Water Act is the primary federal law in the United States governing water pollution. Passed in 1972, the Act established the goals of eliminating releases of high amounts of toxic substances into water, eliminating additional water pollution by 1985, and ensuring that surface waters would meet standards necessary for human sports and recreation by 1983. Now conclusion. What can be concluded? Comprising over 70% of the Earth's surface, water is undoubtedly the most precious natural resource that exists on our planet. Without this seemingly invaluable compound, comprised of hydrogen and oxygen, life on Earth would be non-existent. It is essential for everything on our planet to grow and prosper. Although we as humans recognize this fact, but we disregard it by polluting our lakes, rivers and oceans. Congress has passed laws to try to combat water pollution, thus acknowledging the fact that water pollution is indeed a serious issue. But the government alone cannot solve the entire problem. It is ultimately up to us to be informed, responsible and involved when it comes to the problems we face with our water. We must become familiar with our local water resources and learn about ways for disposing harmful household wastes so they do not end up in sewage treatment plants that cannot handle them or landfills not designed to receive hazardous materials. In our yards, we must determine whether additional nutrients are needed before fertilizers are applied and look for alternatives where fertilizers might run off into surface waters. We have to preserve existing trees and plant new trees and shrubs to help prevent soil erosion and promote infiltration of water into the soil. In order to combat water pollution, we must understand the problems and become part of the solution. Clearly, the problems associated with water pollution have the capabilities to disrupt life on our planet to a great extent. Dear friends, with this we come to the end of today's lecture. Thank you.